know it's post-lunch and whatever, but let's give these two amazing Rockstar panelists a huge round of applause for your energy and for them, please. There we go. Thank you. All right. So we're going to get into some spicy stuff around navigating financial services, blockchain's impact on consulting. My name is Ethan Pierse, and I'm excited to let our two panelists introduce themselves, give us some context as to why we're going to talk about this. So, whenever you want to start, go ahead.
All right, so then I'm going to start. I'm Peter. I'm actually a tech guy who ended up working in the financial service industry now for quite a while. I was one of the co-founders at Solaris Bank, so that got me into the financial service space, but now also already for almost 9 years in the blockchain space, and currently building up Unity, which is a stable coin, euro-based stable coin that's issued from the e-money institute that we currently build up in Germany with BaFin. So, but what's the relation to the topic? I think I would twist around the question also a little bit. What's the impact of consulting to blockchain? Because so I think so we're here on the RWA stage, and reward asset in the end means okay. So there's like a token that has like a physical representation, for example, with a financial instrument which is regulated. And I think also when you walk around the event here, so there's really plenty of people who eventually really never worked in the financial service industry and potentially are pretty new to such topics. And I think there's like plenty of knowledge in the space already, especially with consultancies. And I think so also when it's about legal documentation and legal memos and so on, I think consultants and the industry and the innovators are really closely working together. And I think therefore there's a huge purpose for those kind of collaborations.
Patrick?
Yeah, hi, my name is Patrick Martin. I am a serial entrepreneur. And then I'm running a single family office, investing a lot in the blockchain Web3 space. I have about 60 direct investments and half a dozen funds. I'm on the boards of some of the companies, and I work with consultants sometimes if I have to. But they're a necessary link to the legacy industry, because the legacy industry cannot change unless the consultants tell them how. And that's why we need to kind of bring them in.
Brilliant. Again, my name is Ethan Pierce. I'm the founder of Borderless Ventures, which invests into primarily AI, Web3, creator economy stuff, and maybe some sustainability thrown in there for good measure, in Tallinn and in Singapore. Based here in Paris. I'm also the founder of the Creator Economy Institute, which basically is democratizing all this really cool stuff we can build now as solopreneurs or people that are basically leveraging generative and agentic AI, Web3, no-code, all these amazing things to really build incredible stuff, smaller teams, less capital, amazing things going on in that space. And that takes us into this fantastic discussion of how all the assets around us can be tokenized. Tokenized securities has been a discussion for 5, 6, 7 years that we wanted to make happen. The regulatory stuff has worked out more or less for a lot of it. Now we just need more users, more people in it to scale. Part of the bridge there we need to build then is consultants, because it's consultancies, all the big consultancies, that are the ones telling large corporates, large institutions what to do by advising them on, okay, here's something that you could, maybe a technology you should be looking at, or here's a way to solve that problem or whatever. How do we have that conversation? How do we increase that conversation so that there is more interest from enterprise because they're being advised to take a deeper look at finance through blockchain? Thoughts?
So I would say one of the main things, why do people adopt new technologies? The only reason they adopt new technologies is because it's faster, cheaper, and easier to use. And this is what we need to kind of convey, that it is faster, cheaper, and easier to use. So that's kind of what they need to understand. And then there's an economic incentive to use the new system because it's faster, cheaper, easier to use. And that's kind of where we need to get the consultants on board to basically explain it to them so that they can explain it to their corporates. And at the end of the day, that's what drives adoption. There needs to be an incentive And a company, the only incentive for a company is to increase profitability. That's what they do. And then shareholder value. And so if they can make the same transaction for 30% of the cost, they will eventually go there. But we kind of need to help them and get them on the path. So that's kind of where I see this problem lies.
Peter?
Yeah, and I would also add to those points that with Web3 and anything blockchain related, we're talking about really a paradigm shift that's currently happening in the technology space. So the technology that we have in front of us is not only cheaper and faster. So like he said, it's really about deconstructing the way how we're producing certain services, and especially also on the scale of automation that we can reach with smart contracts, really automizing, for example, financial services almost to 100%, and to automate settlement processes, to have like a high degree of transparency, because the transactions are locked in an open book that everyone can inspect and apply intelligence to it. And I think so when whatever cloud computing was, just to name another trend from like the last 15 years, when cloud computing was introduced, I think that was relatively familiar to the enterprises, because it's just about economies of scale, and I can use infrastructure in a multi-tenant way, and also like with a high degree of automation. So therefore the industries were much faster in the adoption. So there were only the questions around whatever data location, GDPR, and so on that had to be solved, and eventually like enterprise agreements on the legal side. But I think that was relatively easy. But when it's now really about thinking the way you produce services in a complete new way, and you need to think it from the scratch, I think that needs much more explanation. And so if the enterprises have their, let's say, go-to consultants that they trust, where they know that they worked together in the past and made good experiences. So if these consultants kind of bring these messages of like almost producing things from the scratch, that definitely helps with the adoption of crypto, Web3, and all its principles.
So one of the things we discussed on our call that we had before to kind of plan what we wanted to cover was this idea that, by definition, this is a decentralized conversation in terms of the technology itself. And yet, enterprise is subject to a tremendous amount of centralized regulations. So how do we help bridge that idea of, next to us over here with all the DPIN conversations, it's super interesting, except you understand as an enterprise, if you spin up an AWS region in North Virginia and your data's on it, you know what your obligations are because of, what it is. If you do DPIN and all of a sudden your data is in every city, every continent basically around the planet, that becomes harder. So the decentralization thing is interesting. It's a great value proposition, but it creates some maybe regulatory hurdles. What are your thoughts on how we address those, or how we communicate that so that, again, consultancies can bridge that to enterprise?
Yeah, so from my opinion, the enterprises are always tied back kind of to like where they're coming from, and that's like centralization to a large extent. And but on the other side, you need to figure out, so what's the advantage of, for example, building things in a decentralized way. And for example, so me being very deeply involved in financial regulation and having read a lot about it and lots of discussions and so on. So what always fascinated me when I came into the blockchain space was that, so thinking from financial regulation, there's, for example, the question of business continuity management. So how do I manage that my system runs 24/7 and is available at all the times, and can't be manipulated? And you can write like endless concepts and endless documentations, 4i principle, 6i principle, and so on. Things really get complicated if the processes inside a company are executed by humans. Yeah, and in the end, you should never trust another human. So that's really the problem, and therefore you need to have like a the second process that controls the controls, and then you control the controls on the controls, and this is how things work. And I think from the blockchain perspective, so if you're really able to kind of apply so like principle-based regulation to the subject, so which in the end means you want to reach like 24/7 availability. You can achieve that on the one hand with like multiple data centers, or you can achieve that with a cloud computing provider with multiple availability zones, or you can also fulfill the same requirement with a blockchain, so that is like a multi-tenant infrastructure which is distributed across the globe. And therefore I think we need to think for things from the principles first, and then kind of we will automatically find different implementations with like pros and cons, of course, but then we really openly need to address those pros and cons, and then also find solutions on the regulatory side to it.
So I would say stay away from getting people excited about decentralization because they don't understand it. So I think we start with how to make it faster, cheaper, better. And then once they're bought into that, and then we can tell them later. But they don't really care. It's about business process automation and something they can do. And if they can do something they couldn't do before, then they will do it. But they don't care. I mean, to be fair, if I was the CEO of a company, I want to be in full control of everything. So I don't necessarily want to give away control by decentralizing it. So it can be a benefit, but I think in the first place we should not confuse people.
So that really touches on one of the strong points that we kind of brought up before when we discussed, but this issue that crypto is born from kind of an anti-establishment ethos. So it's kind of the system sucks and is bad, we have to get rid of it perspective. And now we're trying to leverage the technology of it with blockchain to actually solve all these problems in historical financial services and different things. So it kind of has to grow up in order to be able to apply technologies that were maybe not necessarily thought of as a way to solve these historical things. It was more maybe a way to replace them. But now we're actually trying to get enterprise to embrace these things. So the decentralization word sounds like a selling point to all the degens, crypto, lovely world. It actually isn't the strong selling point that we think it is when we're talking to corporates. What would you say, how better to frame that conversation? Like I know you've said it, cheap, fast, good, all that make those issues, but how do we, maybe I'll say that differently. Where do you see the understanding level, the comprehension level of technology with consultants or with enterprise? Like, how much do they really get about what we're talking about? Is that the issue? Is there a lot of education that needs to be done? Is there a lot of explanation that they just don't really understand the value proposition of this?
Yeah. So I think there needs to be a new value proposition that adds to something maybe they can't do before. So I was talking to a gentleman earlier in the speakers lounge. He's from Aura Network. So they work with luxury brands, and they basically do proof of source and proof of ownership. So with NFTs around that. And so that's something they couldn't do before because there was no way to do this. So this is a blockchain, this is an NFT, that makes sense. And so this is a separate thing. So I think for certain areas, I think one way to do it is build a separate entity, a parallel entity, either funded by the corporate, and they say, okay, we're building our own decentralized version of our business, where we're giving the team autonomy and they can build it, and then we basically kind of, if they're very forward-looking, they say we can maybe cannibalize our own business because otherwise someone else is going to do it. Or if we want to have a decentralized solution that I think is better, then it will probably be more a competitor. So for the corporate to try to change the inner systems is very, very difficult. So I think it's, I mean, even with consultants, it's going to be very hard, I think.
I had to laugh a little bit because so I think Patrick mostly describes more let's say the CEO's perspective, kind of like from the business side. Okay, faster, cheaper, and so on. So I'm more from the machine room, like as the techie. So we properly play our roles here. So also coming back a little bit to that narrative, because so I think any one of us knows the internet here, right? And like the internet was also not invented like as a platform to whatever gain efficiency in processes to offer software as a service and so on. So it was like a military communication network that was very resilient because of the decentralization. So decentralization for the internet was like a feature to make it really available all the time, so information can flow. And in the end, like the internet developed in a way that we use it as an information platform, as an application platform in the meanwhile, so that there's like plenty of services being implemented and shared across the internet. And I think with the blockchain, it's somehow comparable. But it's actually a much more powerful infrastructure, so that you can build on top of it. And therefore, so I think we need to have these both perspectives. So kind of there's of course the use case perspective. So what can I do with it, and what does it make it better? And there's like plenty of things that makes it better. But there's also the machine room perspective, kind of because the blockchain or crypto brings like a lot of features that can be applied to problems that certain industries have these days, and especially the regulated industries. And just to kind of like also in the role of the consultant to really communicate to both sides. On the one hand, so how do these technical features look like and what are the benefits? And that at the same time then also consulting the businesses how to apply them. I think that's exactly the role here.
So we started the panel by you turning the title around a little bit. Instead of it being blockchain's impact on consulting, but being consulting maybe's impact on blockchain. What are both of your perspectives, or how do you see enterprise, especially the traditional financial services industry's interest in terms of outbound? So we're talking about taking blockchain to them and saying, you need to use this. This would be a cool thing. From your perspectives in your relative activities, do they care? Like, are they looking out saying, oh gosh, it would be really great to have that thing here? Where do you see the conversation? Because the consultants, again, are the bridge. So is it the enterprise looking for this, or is it us trying to get into the enterprise? Us, the royal us.
So I think the attention is on now, especially with the political changes in the US. I think they're cutting a lot of red tape, and then everybody's waking up and saying, oh, okay, so now we're allowed to do this, because until now the US especially was very restrictive around blockchain technology. Most founders that I worked with, they basically, I would tell them, if you start your company, don't do it in the US, or if you're there already, move. Now I think they're coming back. So the regulatory environment is open now for corporates and big enterprises to adopt new systems. They need to have regulatory clarity, because otherwise they're not going to touch it, because it's not a risk they should be taking. And now they're waking up and they're doing it. And now we have BlackRock. Larry Fink is like a big cheerleader for Bitcoin and blockchain. And there's also businesses like one of my portfolio companies, Uphold. They have a blockchain as a service and crypto as a service white label module. So you basically can plug in an already regulated and functioning system, and then you can basically try out new functionalities, because you need to make it user friendly. The problem with blockchain technology until now is very user unfriendly. And so apart from the fact is like, do I need it, is also, do I understand it and how do I use it? And that's, I think those problems, they're getting solved now. And then, so there is outbound interest to do it, but it needs to be user friendly. Otherwise, they're not gonna want to do it.
Yeah, and I think also lots of enterprises really feel attracted from the new business that can be generated, right? So because in the end, especially enterprises have like very structured processes, kind of like, okay, what's the like a future business that we want to take? So how big is it? So can you like calculating a case for it and so on? And I think for a long while, the crypto industry has been kind of maybe also when looking around in the hall here. It's very colorful, and so I would say also to some extent also distracting for businesses, because they so many things are working in a different way. So like how you generate attention and how you do business and so on. So it's like completely different. But so now as the space is growing, also the enterprises of course feel attracted and want to generate business. And I think that automatically then soaks in kind of these players, and that they then also have like a commercial willingness to adapt what they do and how they do it.
So you said user-friendly in terms of the UX and stuff. That's definitely a huge problem. Part of it's also just the fact that primarily blockchain infrastructure is going to be invisible to most people. So we've been trying to tell people on the retail side, oh, you should care about crypto, you should care about blockchain. The reality is, it's like most technologies, people when they go on Amazon don't know how the website works, how the logistics works, how any of the back end of that infrastructure is allowing them to click on something and have it in their mailbox tomorrow. They just have the value. It just happens. This is, a lot of people in Web3 have been maybe slightly frustrated in how AI interest has scaled so quickly. But you can go to ChatGPT, type something in the box, and click enter, and you go, oh, okay, that did a thing. We don't have that in a lot of ways with most stuff in crypto and blockchain, because it's the technology behind that's going to be doing lots of stuff for us. How do you think we can maybe work on or improve that awareness in the sense that so that enterprise understands this is part of the technology stack that will help them solve problems, bring new business, create new opportunities, but isn't necessarily something that's going to be visible. It's not a technology that you really put out on the front of your website and say, hey, by the way, we do blockchain. That doesn't help you sell stuff.
Yeah, I would say that's probably they probably shouldn't do that, because it's just more, it's like that's like a deterrent more than anything. But I think when you mentioned AI, what I can envision and what we should work on is basically using large language models or language models in order to interact with blockchains, so that you can actually tell in real world language, you say, okay, I want XYZ transaction to be happening on the Arbitrum network or on Avalanche or on Ethereum, and I want you to do this now and with this input, and then the AI does it and implements it, so that no humans need to touch it anymore, and I can actually talk to the machine. That's going to be the way, because otherwise user friendliness is very hard to achieve. And I mean, as I say, I look at it, as you said, I look at it from a CEO point of view, and it needs to work, right? Nobody cares how the fridge, the Freon cycle in a fridge works. They just care that the food is cold, right? And so basically, same with blockchain inside. If it works, everybody's happy. If it can do something they couldn't do before, everybody's happy. But nobody needs to know how it works. And the blockchain inside is not it can be a feature, but people don't need to know about it. The consumer doesn't need to know about it. They just need to know it works, basically.
Yeah, I also agree on that point. The example that I usually use for this is, for example, when you buy a stock, traditionally with a broker, whatever. In Germany, there's Trade Republic, the most used startup for this. If you would ask the random person in the street, that person wouldn't be able to explain what happens in the background. So that there's a broker, there's a market maker, there's like different licenses involved, there's a depot bank, so doing the settlement, there's like a custodian, and actually that custodian in Germany is a monopoly, blah, 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 blah. So they wouldn't know about it. So they just ask themselves, okay, why does it take such a long time until the money arrives on my bank account and so on? But they maybe somehow think like, okay, well, maybe the servers are too slow or something like this. And I think what happens in the future, and this is also goes perfectly to Patrick's point, in the end there will be like a revolution on the back-end side. So where you have digital assets being issued on a chain, and you have digital money, like also Unity, for example, being issued on a chain, and you can settle instantly or atomically this transaction. So no cum-ex and no whatever manipulation possible, because there's only at one point in time there's only one owner of the security and of the money, and you do that exchange atomically. And but you in the end implement it in the background in a way that whatever the user of Trade Republic just does a transaction and then wonders, wow, okay, this was fast. It's already settled. The money is already on the bank account. And then you do another trade, and you do another trade, and another trade, and everything settles. And I think most of the users will think like, okay, so they maybe added a few more CPUs to their backend, and now it's faster. Okay, great, I love it. And but in the end, everything is blockchain powered, and the people in the end don't need to know about that.
So with the 4 minutes that we have left, I'd like to get both your perspectives on just where you think the areas of financial services, what areas are either the most attractive or the most promising. Where do you see us in the next 6 months, year, 2 years, 3 years, really adopting and moving forward on the real world assets, maybe subject, or just the general idea of more blockchain, crypto, Web3, RWA, DeepIn, whatever, in financial services? What are your thoughts about what's promising over the next couple months to a year?
So from my perspective, also talking about RWA, what I say for a while already is that I believe that stablecoins are the first real-world asset that will really hit the masses. And so in whatever form, so this could be on the one hand, of course, like in crypto, like in payments, in remittances, but also then as like a settlement instrument in automized digital finance. But also you could, from my perspective, also integrate stablecoins into classical fintechs and use stablecoins as an on-off ramp and to automate transactions between businesses. So there's a lot of use cases, and I think so this space will radically grow in Europe, but also globally. And then kind of the next step will be then the real-world assets in terms of securities, bonds, and so on, so that they then will also slowly adapt to being issued and being used in the broad public.
Perfect. Patrick?
So my prediction is every security on the planet will be on blockchain in 5 to 10 years. I think that's the long term, but I think it should be maybe 2 or 3 years, because it's faster, better, more secure. It's to move your collateral around. So all there's a lot of benefits to doing it. And it's already started, and it's when people see, so that's a very easy benefit, because it's just it just fulfills all the requirements of being a better system. And you can basically, the banks can fire thousands of people in the back office because they don't need a back office anymore. So I think for securities, and they need to settle against stablecoins, I totally agree. And we need to build up the Euro stablecoin ecosystem. So you're doing it. There's a couple of other companies doing it, but it's all still very small. But in Europe, we're still in Europe, and we need to work on a digital euro. We cannot work with a digital dollar. It doesn't make sense. So once this is up and running, and for different jurisdictions, you need to have a stablecoin in that jurisdiction. But then all tradable assets should be tokenized and settle against stablecoins, because that's the only sensible thing to do once you understand it.
Brilliant. And I do think, as you mentioned it both in different ways, the AI automation, I think, is going to enable a lot more adoption, just because if we look at agentic AI, and agentic AI just basically means that the algorithms are on their own, that they have a specific function, like you can imagine a whole list of employees that do things in a company. Each of those employees is maybe now an agent. Well, if they're doing things between each other that involve transactions, whether it's data or money or whatever, the blockchain becomes fascinating for them to be able to communicate between each other and handle those transactions. I think that allows for a lot of scale to allow us to do this faster, cheaper, like you mentioned.
So on this one, we need the blockchain for them to interact and pay each other, but we also need the blockchain to control the agents, because we need to know a single source of truth that records on the blockchain all these transactions that happen and why and when, because otherwise they will just do what they want and we don't know, right? So that's not good. So we need to control the AI by blockchain. Is a very good blockchain AI fits together there very, very well.
I think that's exactly why, for me, all the scale we're seeing in, like Tuesday at the AI Summit, France announced 109 billion in investment into AI and infrastructure, and yesterday the EU announced another 200 billion. There's a crazy amount of capital and stuff coming into, especially the European version of this. We have the Stargate thing in the US for $500 billion. I actually think that's really bullish for crypto and Web3, because all of that stuff is going to involve transactional, ledgerized data or information, and that just makes AI scaling, drags this along with it. Please give our two rockstar panelists a huge round of applause. Thank you both for your time. And they'll be available in the back if you want to have a chat.